Welcome to the Unsidelined Life, the podcast that challenges and encourages women to stop denying themselves a full life and to step boldly into the opportunities God is preparing for you. Join me for raw insights and engaging conversations to guide your journey of self-discovery and pursue the life that God created for you. My name is Eileen Noyes. I've been starting these, I call these just conversations with women who have in some shape or form been part of the NFL. It has started with women that I know, women that have played. I always say that. I know I didn't play football, but like women who are in the same time that I've been in, women that have we've kind of like missed each other or just met. They were in, and then I was new, and then women I played with, and then as I was going out, they were coming in. This is who I am talking to today. And so she is the first of the ones on my list that is not part of the Packers. And so this has been a unique dynamics of how we've met. We're obviously going to hit on that. But I wanted to introduce her to you guys. Again, Christiana Cook. Tell us a little about you, like where, obviously, again, this is like the connection is because our spouse or ex-spouse or whatever has been connected to the NFL. So I will start and I will have you just go ahead and introduce yourself and we'll go from there.
As you said, Christiana Cook. My ex played in the NFL 2016 and then 5 years. So whatever year that ended up ending. He started off with the Vikings for 2 years, and then he went to the Redskins. Well, now they're, I think, just called Washington.
Yeah, whatever they are, changed the name again.
In my mind, they will forever be the Redskins. So they're the Redskins, and then we went to the Raiders, and then we ended up with the Bears at the end. Yeah, so that was, and I noticed one of the questions you had sent was, did you meet in the very beginning, blah, blah, blah. I was a massage therapist. So I actually was going to school at the time for biomedical engineering. And one of my classmates, who was also in my chemistry courses, we gave him a massage. Just so happened his dad was like the personal coordinator for the players, like making sure they're happy and all that kind of crap. So he gave my number to one of the other players, Babs, who he didn't make it in the NFL, but he's actually in the WWE now.
That's typically a thing.
Yeah, he was humongous. And Babs gave my name and number to TJ's roommate at the time, Tyrus. And so I went down there to massage Tyrus, and TJ was in there. And then he asked me for my number for a massage. Mm-hmm. And I was like, sure. But then he was like, oh, text when you get home safe. And I'm like, awkward. Like, clients generally don't ask me to do that. So I got, because it was raining, but I got home and I was like, I'm alive. And he was like, oh, would you like to go on a date? And I was like, I'm in the middle of finals week, so you're gonna have to wait till the end of that. But also I was just a little nervous because he was so big that I was like, if he tries to do anything, I can't stop him. And in Minnesota, the Vikings were real, like many years ago, decades ago, very naughty on Lake Minnetonka on an Allen Almas boat. They were like harassing sexually the waitresses. And one of the guys was like, it's international waters.
Oh my gosh.
You're in Lake Minnetonka. It's not international. Wow. It's all within Minnesota.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I was a little concerned, but then I saw he had interned with the Secret Service, because I could Google him. And I was okay. No criminal record here, because he couldn't have done that if he had. So I wasn't. Right. I felt more comfortable to go on a date with him then, and yeah.
Okay, so you didn't know him. He was already in the league.
Well, he just got there. He was just got drafted, so he hadn't, we literally met at the beginning of his career.
Okay. So then how soon after did you get married?
He proposed after we dated for 7 months, and then we were married that off season. So very quickly, but probably because I was a virgin and I was like, I'm not sleeping with anybody till I'm married. And
he
wanted to do that, and so he proposed.
Wow.
And we were married very quickly.
Okay, so can I ask you that, like, was it your Christian beliefs that kept you to that, or were you okay? Because I'm a Christian too, but I I messed up. We want to do it right, but yeah.
Yeah, no,
So
I was going to say, it was like I felt very strongly that I had to follow that, but also like my personality, I don't even like hug people
okay, yeah,
unless
yeah.
I feel comfortable with them. Like I'm very, which is ironic. I'm a massage therapist, but I'm choosing to touch them. But I don't
Yeah.
want people, I don't want them touching me. I said, regardless of my being Christian, I probably wouldn't have, because physical contact makes me feel so vulnerable. So letting somebody know me that intimately would just be very like
Right.
bizarre to me.
Okay. Yeah. No, I get it. Because I mean, thankfully, from what I gather, I think my boys are, and same type of thing. Like they're haven't had girlfriends, and I mean they're Christian, they believe in Jesus, and they're all in their different faith walks. But yeah, I'm happy to say, like, if you're not around it, if you're not, some circumstances are just easier to not have to be confronted by,
Oh, it was a very intentional. Like obviously, guys tried,
yeah.
but you know,
Awesome.
I was just like,
Awesome.
ew, no, thank
Yeah.
you. They had just
Okay, so
good rules,
uh,
but yeah,
yeah. Okay, so how many kids do you have?
5.
Okay, that's
So
my
I
thought. And
have
then what the
Trey,
ages?
who's 6, and then Aurora, who is 4. She's turning 5 in August, and then the triplets, who just turned 3 in April.
Okay.
So
Wait, what are the ages again?
6,
5?
4, and 3. So when
Wow.
they were all born, I had 5 kids, 3 and under. It
That's
was,
insane.
and of course, going through the culty crap. So that was
Yes.
kicking.
Yes. Which leads to my next question is, okay, so I had just mentioned that we didn't know each other, our spouses, they weren't playing together.
Yeah.
So somehow we got connected.
Mhm.
Would you like to explain how that happened?
How that happened? Well, first off, my ex, he retired, and he was very concerned about the end of the world because of COVID and things like that. And we had actually just moved to a farm. I've always been very concerned about like the chemicals that they put in our food and things like that. So I was like, I don't even know and trust that like when they say it's organic, that it truly is organic. So I was like, let's get a farm and we can grow our own food so we know exactly what's
Right.
happening with all that stuff. So we bought a farm, we were doing that. So we were homesteading, learning to grow food. Obviously, neither of us came from that background. So we had not a clue. So he was watching a bunch of YouTube videos about homesteading, farming. Obviously, we were strong Christians. That's questionable for him. Um, and uh, on his feed from the algorithm, because also he was really into guns. Well, we both are. All those combinations popped up
Okay.
Dowell and his group of cronies, and he started watching it and got himself into it. And then after the very first time he went to visit them, I was like, I just have a bad feeling about this. He'd just gone to Colorado for an inpatient treatment facility for like mental stuff due to the NFL. And while he was there, he pretty much indoctrinated himself because he had so much free time. They allowed him to have his phone as a privilege for being an NFL player. Because generally, they take your phones away from you when you go to those type of places. They did
Okay.
not for him, so he was able to like watch a bunch of stuff. Called Dowell, spoke to your husband. Like one of the times, like we always had a habit throughout our entire dating and marriage was that every night we would pray together before bed. And there were nights that he pushed me off because he was talking to your ex. He's like, I'm on the phone. I'm like, who the H are you on the phone with? I'm pregnant with fucking triplets, taking care of a farm by myself. I want to go to bed, bro. Like, just give me a call. We can do a quick prayer and go back to your call. But he was just like pushing me off. And I was like, this is so bizarre. Like, he's being so rude. Anywho, your husband or ex husband. Um, and so then, anyways, so I remember that TJ was telling me about how your ex-husband would talk about you, and he's like, oh yeah, like he's like his wife left him, took all the kids, all because she didn't want to do Sabbath. And I go, TJ, in no way, shape, or form would any woman be like, sorry, I don't want to be with you because you want to make me rest on Saturdays and not do work. I was like, there's no way. No woman would be like, you want me not to work 1 day a week?
Right.
How
Right.
dare you? I'm
Yeah.
leaving.
Yeah.
It's just like, TJ, that doesn't make any logical sense. He's like, it's what it is. And I'm like, I doubt it. So anyways, after he left to visit for the first time, and mind you, a lot of his behavior had changed radically. He was being very rude, very aggressive.
It wasn't
I
like that before.
No, he had moments of it. Um, and I referred to that character. His name was TJ, by the way, and his full name was Trevor Anthony Clemmings Jr. So when he was a jerk, I referred to that individual as Trevor.
Okay,
So
the
I
mom.
counted the instances that Trevor came out.
Yeah.
So he had moments of that, but I didn't see it often. My assumption is that that character played on the field, and so
Mhm.
that's why I didn't have to see him often. Um, but then he went, and I was like, okay, I remember them talking about that wife. I'm like, I wonder if I can look this thing up. So I started looking it up, and then I came across the Sports Illustrated stories. And so I started reading it, read about you. I tried to look you up. I found you, I think, on Instagram, wrote you. You're not the greatest with technology.
No.
So I
Yeah,
never responded.
wow.
And
Oh
because
my
I was like, I need help. I need somebody to help me. And so I reached out to you. You didn't get back, but TJ's manager, Mike, he's an amazing Christian man, by the way, which is why TJ chose him, because he is an upstanding Christian man. Mike McCarthy or McCartney or McCarthy. My
yeah,
sister's
it's
name
McCartney
McCarthy.
because McCarthy is a tackler coach. Well, I mean, not that there could be more
Well,
than
that they could be
one
more.
Mike.
I think it's
But
McCartney. But anyways, I called him and was like, hey, trying to get help with the TJ situation. But I also said there's this story and there's this author who wrote these things. I go, I really need help. I would love, I go, do you have contacts with this woman? So then I was able to talk to Kayleen, and Kayleen had your number. So
okay, that's
Kayleen was
okay.
like,
That's what I was like, okay, I'm like, I could have sworn it was through her, but it was through her, but you were trying to get to me before that.
yeah. So she was like, well, I'll ask her if she's willing to talk to you, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I would love it. Cause like, obviously her ex is like TJ's Darth Sith and I need help. um,
Yes.
and yeah, so that was how I was able to call you. But some of the stuff I'd even heard about your story had already been helping me before that. TJ was like, and she would record their conversations. And I was like, well, she must have had a reason for that, is what I
Mhm.
was thinking. So when he and I would have conversations after he left, I recorded all of them
Wow.
because she was doing it. There must have been a reason.
Yeah.
So I will do it too.
Wow. Okay,
Because
so I mean,
anyways,
we're hitting the ground running. Like this is some pretty serious like conversation that we're having, and even through this process, I'm like, do we say names? Do we, like how do we go? And so even as I'm hearing you, it's like, do we say your ex's name? I mean, I obviously, well, shoot, even in my book, I don't.
so legally, obviously, because I'm going to be
Yes, yes.
legally, so long as you only say things that are true and you mention their name, it's not defamation.
Okay.
If it's proven by the facts, I mean, they could pull up a suit.
Right.
But as long as you only speak the truth, there's no harm in it. Because I had these
Good
concerns
to
before
know.
during the podcast with Sports Illustrated, which hasn't come out yet. I was very concerned. I'm like, what if they come after me to try to sue me? So I was trying to get like Sports Illustrated to take the liability in the contracts, which they wouldn't.
Mhm.
But they're like, we fact checked everything, blah, blah, blah. And I had some friends who are lawyers and I asked them about it. And that was his advice to me. He said, so long as everything you say is the truth, he
Mhm.
goes, then it doesn't matter. They can pull a lawsuit. He goes, but if it's the truth, then it will be proven and then it's
Yeah.
useless.
Right. Well, I mean, even in my situation with courts and things like that, when it was the other way, when I'm hearing these things that I'm thinking aren't true about me, and I'm thinking like, how do I can I use this in court? And it was, I mean, you had to go through some big time hoops to even file for
Well,
any
so
kind of.
essentially there's two different forms of defamation. One is like that it affects your business. And if
Mhm.
you can prove that, there's damages for that then you can sue them for that, get defamation, and then receive the funds of like, you caused a loss to my business because of the lies that you said. For a
Mhm.
person, if you could prove emotional damage from the things that they said that were untrue, you could sue for that as well. But when I spoke to it, because I did actually contact a lawyer about defamation because TJ was saying all sorts of horrible things about
Oh,
you too that
yeah.
were untrue.
Yeah. Mhm.
And he was like, he goes, honestly, you can do it. He goes, but it's such an uphill battle. The
Right.
lawyer fees are going to be extensive. He goes, in the end of it, it's almost like a moot point.
Yeah. Yeah.
because you're going to spend so much in lawyer fees that how much are they going to pay you? And it's so hard to prove. He goes, even sometimes when it's proven, you don't get paid out. Like he told me some story of somebody who got it
So,
proven, but then hadn't been paid out. So I saw it as kind of like not really necessary. I figured, well, if I really want to, once I'm a lawyer, unless there's a statute of limitations on his comments, I was like, I'll just do it myself once I get there.
wow. I mean, you are fully in as like that's what you're doing is you're in
Yeah.
law school. You've been.
Well, I'm not
Okay.
in law school yet. And actually I'm taking a criminal law course currently, but it's for my undergraduate in forensic psychology, which is essentially how psychology meets the courtroom and how it affects with law. And
Yeah.
so, which I've always found the way people tick very interesting. So,
Yeah.
but it will be helpful once I get to, law school and whatnot. And that should hopefully not be this fall, but the following fall.
Okay. Super
Exciting.
impressive. Like, see, this is part of the reason why I've been wanting to do this because, whenever like in the media and what see what is portrayed, what the stereotype is. I mean, the women behind the scenes, they don't have a voice, they don't have a personality, they're just the wife of, they're just the mom of, and all you see is like more of the ones that are more famous. Not that I even want that, but it just kind of just blankets all of us. And so one of my things is I love that I get to highlight these women and not only in terms of the NFL and the pro athlete world, but like there are women who are doing it, who are rocking it, like being mom.
There's like that one woman who was in the show Scandal. She's married to a football player.
Okay.
So she's humongous, obviously. And then what's her nuts? Who's married to the one in Washington? She was a singer. Sierra. She's
Okay.
married to an NFL player. She's huge. And then actually one of the girls I used to be friends with, well, we hung out once. I don't know if I'd call us friends. She seemed very cool though. Oh dear heavens, what is her name now? She's actually like made it. She was Miss Minnesota,
Okay.
married to Rex. She stayed virgin until she was married as well. Was married to her
Oh,
ex forever. He was an
oh, the Rex
interesting
too.
character, but they divorced. He's luckily not in a cult. But
Yeah.
she's like doing like red carpets and crap. She's beautiful, red hair from
Okay,
Minnesota.
you might have to connect me with her. So,
I'm not like I could text her and ask, but like I've written her once because I was like, hey, because like we went to the state fair once together, her like as couples, and she never responded. So
oh, okay.
I don't know
Yeah.
how well that would be. I don't think I'm cool enough or something. Or maybe she's
Oh,
technology like you.
oh my gosh. Well, okay, so I don't want to jump again because I want to highlight you and all that you're doing later. But like let's go back into like this whole, cult thing, which again, here I'm thinking I'm just getting a hold of these women that I knew. And every time I called someone, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is how I remember the dynamics with her. And this is what sticks out to me. And so as I was like calling them and saying, hey, well, these are the things that like these are topics of conversation um, they all fell in line with somewhere in the book. So it was like relational with spouse or transition in or transition out or like what was hard for you? How was it like, when your husband like got big and you're like the quiet one and like all of a sudden you're in this world where you kind of have to be in the limelight just because he is. And then there was the others that, at least from my point of view, there was that challenge of feeling, and I probably felt that too like, am I supposed to be in that limelight? Am I supposed to have this voice? Am I supposed to like look at this as a platform? Like he doesn't. So I know it varies throughout, just women and personalities.
Yeah, I'd say my personality, I wasn't a wallflower. I actually found it hard because I always got attention for just being me. And I remember it was our first date that I noticed the shift. We were walking into a theater to watch the Marvel Avengers,
Ooh,
and
yeah.
everybody was looking at us, but they were looking at me in a different way than they ever had before. And I was like, what in the world? And I realized it was because I was with him that they were looking at me, not because I was, beautiful or anything like that. They were looking at me as an extension or accessory of
Right.
his. And I
Wow.
remember being like, "Ugh, I don't like that." And then,
So good. I
uh,
love this.
I didn't like it. And then after we got married, and even just people out of the woodwork from my childhood that weren't particularly kind to me would suddenly reach out and be like, "Oh, you want to hang out?" and stuff like that. So suddenly now I was cool to them, the ones that didn't like me beforehand and like wanted to hang out. And like I remember I was at my best friend's wedding and we had just started dating, and one of my other friends was like, oh, she's dating an NFL player. And then one of the other girls was like, oh my goodness, that's so cool. And I was like, yeah, only because of who I'm dating. Like
Yeah.
said it very sarcastically back, like, no, that's, not what's cool. Um,
You
so
are
I
a
had a
character
really
for
hard
sure.
time because I was overshadowed by this huge man who casts a very large shadow. And I was engulfed in it. And like, well, the thing I hated most was when we would go church shopping because he didn't like my church.
Hmm.
White. And so we would go shopping to different churches and stuff like that. And he used to get mad at me. He's like, why do you always answer questions for me? And I said to him, I go, TJ, if I go, okay, this next Sunday when we go, I will not speak unless spoken to. And you watch how often they talk to me. And we did. And they didn't
Wow.
talk to me once. None of the questions were directed at me. They were all directed at him. And he was like, oh. I was like, yeah. So I just speak up answering the questions because I don't want to just sit there being a little bump on
So
a log.
you made a point, like I'm here. I'm,
Yeah, I was like,
not in
I
a
didn't
bad
like it.
way, but
So the church that we finally ended up choosing was one that didn't treat him that way and didn't treat me that way.
okay.
So
Yep.
that was
Yep.
like the church that we eventually ended up choosing, which was nice because I was like, oh, they see me as a person and I'm not an
Right.
extension of him. So
Yeah.
that was
Wow. Super insightful because I totally remember, I went to the first time I went to a church. I was on my own because obviously he was playing.
mm,
So it wasn't the church that he was going to. And I remember like it was actually a guest speaker. And I was like, I love this church. I love the worship. I love everything. And we go the next week or whenever we had to go together. And total same thing. Like the pastor went boop, right past me and said hi. And I was like, wow, okay. Because I'm thinking like, hi. Like I was about to be like, hey, I'm new here, honestly, that first conversation was about tithing. Like he took him to the back and talked about tithing.
let me explain biblical tithing.
So yeah, so that
Right.
obviously it left a bad taste in our mouths, and I mean everything's fine right now, but like when those things happen so much, you have to develop thick skin, but then you're also like, I know that I was like, who can I trust? Who do I, who really sincerely wants to know me? And so the good thing is, I think in my mind, people had to kind of go through different, different levels and different like I don't want to say hoops, but you just get to where, okay, these are solid, these are like true friendships. And so they stuck because I think I put like different walls up and
Mm.
made sure they passed. And so it's definitely harder to like get to that friend place of trust. But yeah, I mean, I love that. Yeah, that you're bringing up things that like I haven't thought.
Generally, too, I'd say there's a nervous energy in the persons that are approaching you because of what you do and who you're attached to than who you are.
Yes.
And
Yes.
like once I was able to identify that they all had this particular feel to them and their approaches, I just learned to be courteous, but not allow those people into my life.
Mhm. Okay,
So
so outside, like what were your other challenges as in the biggest time frame of like of him playing? I mean, did you travel with him or
yeah, I traveled with them every time. So it was like it was difficult because they get
how many
picked
teams? It's like four teams, three teams.
Vikings, Redskins, Raiders, Bears, four. Yeah, 4 in 5 years.
Okay. Whew.
Um, so a lot of it was actually like me having to pick up the pieces and create homes every place we went. He would just drop on the drop of the dime. And every time we moved or he hurt himself, I was either pregnant or had just given birth.
My
And
gosh.
like, and so it was just like, and it was all left on me to
Yes.
do everything. And we were always trying to be exceedingly frugal. So most of the times, unless the team was covering it, so like when he got cut from the Redskins, picked up by the Raiders, there's like, oh, we'll pay for everything to be moved. So luckily I just like was able to, I mean, essentially like they just came and did everything. So I just had to like, but I needed help because I had Trey, who was I think like 9 months at the time, and I had a dog, a huge dog, who's
Hmm.
like part Great Dane, part pit bull. And I was
Okay.
like, I can't handle these two on my own. Like, what if I have to pee? I was
Right.
like, the plane bathrooms are too small. So I called Brandon, who was his best friend and who was just a gem. Like almost every time too that we moved or got cut, Brandon just so happened to be there. If he wasn't happened to be there, I called him with the Redskins. It's like, hey, where are you? And he's like, I'm in an airport. I'm like, would you come to Virginia and
Oh
fly with me
my
from
gosh.
Virginia to California? And he did. He was like,
Wow.
give
What a
me a little
great
bit.
friend.
And so he did it. He came, he flew with me. He helped me find where to live in California. We walked through the ghettos of Oakland together. And I was like, I feel like I'm going to get shivved. And he
Yeah.
was like,
Uh-huh.
well, I think there's a fancy place, Walnut Creek. So like, he was just so knowledgeable. And he and I are still friends, even though, you know,
Is
I'm
he
not.
still friends with him?
Yeah, I call him.
No, is he still friends with?
Oh, is TJ still friends with him? From what Brandon says, I mean, like when I think Brandon said the last time he saw him was like 2 years ago in the
Mhm.
spring,
Mhm.
but like no, like the only time he's no, I mean that's his story, and I don't want to say anything in case TJ
Right,
were
right.
to listen to
Yes,
this.
yes,
Like
yes.
Brandon, but
Yeah,
Brandon is so
yeah,
with the
yeah.
protection of Brandon, because
Yes, got it.
I can
Okay.
assume that TJ will hear because your ex is obsessed with you, so he will watch this.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I still I don't talk too much about my situation. I haven't even here I'm asking everybody else questions and I haven't, unless people ask me, I have not talked um totally openly about it. Like people will ask about the books that I've written and I say I don't even talk about it's been very vague. So you had mentioned the Sports Illustrated there's that three-day article. And so that same journalist partnered up with someone else. And so we were both part of a podcast that is going to be 8 weeks. And it's supposed to be end of summer in the fall. And so
Yeah,
that's
but who knows? Because they've been saying they've been giving us dates forever.
yes. Yeah. So I would say that's the most like open I've been, and then a couple times, and I think more so, but yeah, I mean, it's
Didn't you have a blog where you talked about it and crap?
I mean, yeah, there were for sure blogs, but even there, it was more of not of being very like
Painting broad strokes.
yeah, very general with the hard stuff and more because I wanted to give glory to God. More I wanted it to be more that like God was faithful to take care of us. I mean, it's interesting because like when people I start reading the first book and it's the one that's more obviously like pro athlete related. They one person was saying like, yeah, I was intrigued. I wanted to hear about your story and I wanted to hear about your ex. And he goes, but as I went on with it wasn't even about him at all. It wasn't even about like wanting to like get to the juicy stuff. He was like, I was just kind of intrigued by where you'd gone with the book. And so yeah, so as you say these things like it is interesting. Like I spoke for the first time. I did a speaking engagement in Wisconsin. And I felt like God was saying you need to start there because
It was your breeding
like,
ground.
yeah, like exactly. It's like, okay, like this is where the devil tried to steal. This is where testimony needs to begin. And it was interesting because I had heard that he read the book, that he knew I was in town. Yeah, just those things. I mean,
I definitely get creepy stalker vibes from him. But they do
I don't
say, they do
even
say
like I'm like, okay, should we say these?
traditionally, I said they're vibes. I didn't call them one. It wasn't an identity. It was just a vibe, you know. Um, choosing my words carefully. No, like what was I gonna say? Oh, my brain.
You said stalker vibes and yeah. Um
My brain went blank.
yeah, that's I mean, okay, so like, and I do mention the fact that there's a bunch of YouTubes of me. I'm assuming that they're about you too. I don't know how
Most more about, I mean, like, so this is just for my, so when I'm, sometimes when I'm curious about how TJ's doing, because I assume he has a Facebook and stuff, but I can't see anything about him. I can see his YouTube. And if he hasn't posted anything, which he hasn't in a long time, I'll check your exes. And so I'll see like little snippets of him being all like, that woman, or being like, talking about having two wives creates good competition. I was just like, you know, that's like the most.
so those are fairly current ones, right?
Somewhat, yeah. It's because like if I'm curious, like every so often I'll go and look. Oh, that was what the comment I was going to make was. Oh, is that common in divorces? Is that the ex-spouse is a part of the grieving process, at least psychologically speaking, from what I read in my books. Watching and following and like wanting to know where they're at and stuff like that is a part of grief within the divorce because like you used to know where they were all the time, stuff like that. So that's like a part of the grieving process. And from what I've seen in the videos and how ardently he speaks about you and your situation and continues to so many years post divorce, I think he's still grieving the loss of the life he had, because if he didn't, he would stop.
Yes, for sure.
And so I think he's grieving, and I think he's also trying to prove to himself
Yes,
that what he's chosen is right. If he truly felt that what he'd chosen is right, he wouldn't feel the need to keep hammering
yes,
that
totally.
man, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And so those are the things that I notice from watching it, and I'm like, oh. But I think your ex had a lot more care and love for you because of how much the hatred, like the love to hate, how it transitioned. Like he so ardently goes against you. Like he talks more about you than he does his current wives.
Yeah, which I think I first of all, I thought he only had one, but I rarely keep up. It's funny because the journalist is the one who I get a lot of
He
information.
told you that he's like, oh, he's got another one.
Yeah, she's like, he's married. She messaged me when he was having the first kid, and it's crazy because I mean, yeah, I totally feel that. Like I'm going on with my life, like, and I just wish, like, gosh, like, why can't you? Why are you still doing all these things? And like you said, I was just talking to someone about this. I said, um, it's probably, I won't talk about him. I'm just talking in general. If someone like started believing this thing and walked away from his family and walked away from everything, and then was confronted with the possibility that he was wrong, like it's better to just stay and hold so tightly to the false thing.
Well, they double down. That's generally what they do. Instead of recognize that like you wrecked your whole life.
Oh my gosh, yes. I walked away like from a lie. I walked away from all this.
Yeah.
So
No, like that they've done, I read about that in my psychology books too. They literally were talking about people who followed like doomsday cults. And like when the date came that things were supposed to end, they had to either recognize and leave, or they doubled down. And they're like, well, it was because of this, or our prayers worked, or like all this kind of stuff. So they just like became even more entrenched because it was like otherwise they had to take responsibility for what they did. And I think that takes larger action to do. And it's easier to just, I'm going to go even harder into this because otherwise I have to confront what I did.
Yes.
And that was for both of our husbands very dastardly. So
yes. Okay, so more on us than like how hard was it? What was the hardest thing? And first of all, when did you see it coming with the whole cult thing? And then how, because I mean, since I've known you, like you're a very strong woman. But obviously there's hard points. Like, well, when did you see it coming? Let's just start there. When did you see it coming?
Well, I saw it coming. Like he had me listen to a video of Dowell's while we were picking up some farm cats from like really far away, but the video didn't talk about the guy's beliefs. He was just kind of ranting in his car, talking about like how neighbors didn't like him and all this kind of stuff. And I just remember thinking and saying, well, what is he doing that his neighbors would dislike him so much? Like that seems a little unusual.
Yeah.
Unless like there's a bunch of heathens in the place that he lives. And this is in reference to Dowell. But when I really knew that I was in trouble with it was when he was in Colorado for the month at the inpatient treatment facility. And he started acting really weird, saying stuff really weird, and like not following the patterns that we had made, like breaking the call at night to talk to your husband. And he did it twice. We also had a rule. He's not allowed to get massages from other female therapists because he has an issue of cheating. And he just willy-nilly was like, oh, I got a massage. I'm like, oh, okay. What was the therapist like? Oh, she. And I was like, she?
Yeah.
We had an agreement. You're not allowed to do that. Like, that's why you found the dude here. And then he was just, I was like, we had said if you did it again, I would divorce you. And he's like, oh, no. And he got all angry with me because, like, in the past, your ex didn't, but my ex was a habitual cheater. He's a habitual lying stepper. And so he was always cheating. And so it was like, the goal was that he would stop and, like, be repentant, which means a 180 turning, not doing it again. Keep your junk in your pants, please. Don't text people. Don't look at things.
Love this one.
It's just how hard could it be? But it was apparently too hard. So, yeah, so for us, I saw all that happening, and like he didn't have the remorse that he would at least act like he had in the past. He was angry with me, like, "Oh, how I'm here and I'm stressed out," and it's like, and so I was worried. So I was like calling our therapist, calling our pastor, and being like, "Hey, can you guys reach out to him? Something bad is happening over there." I was like, "I'm
Oh
really
wait,
worried." I even called the
was he in
place.
the league? Was he getting done? Was he already done?
He was already done. He was at Colorado in a treatment facility for like depression and anxiety caused by the
Oh,
NFL.
gotcha. Okay.
And so like he's there and he's deteriorating. I remember laughingly making a joke. We went to this like one church event before he left, and pastor like prayed for us, and I go, so long as he comes back, healthier and not more crazy, I go, I'm good. And it was just like, oh, really?
Well,
Well,
standard. Yeah, maybe a
now
little
that happened.
bit.
He came back nuttier than a box of Better Butters. So
Wow.
yeah, so that was happening. And then like, he was leaving. I still had really high hopes of he could come back to himself. Like that's why I got legally
I have
separated initially.
conversations.
I was talking to you and I was like, I was literally thinking and doing every plan I could think of to try to bring this man back.
Mhm. And
And
how
it was
far
a
along were you?
pregnant.
Yes.
Um, well, he left in January and I got pregnant in August and the babies were born in April. So I don't know.
Wait,
But
he left
I
in
got what?
say that again? He
I
left.
got pregnant August. He
Oh,
left for the cult in January. Like he was like, I'm leaving for an unknown amount of time to an undisclosed location. That happened January. He went to crazy camp, or I call it crazy camp, but proper term, inpatient treatment facility in Colorado in
oh,
November.
I thought you were talking about the cult. I thought you were talking
Oh,
about the
I mean,
cult.
they're both crazy camp.
Because it can, yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and then I gave birth in April. So,
Wow. Okay. And he was
but
not involved in the pregnancy or anything like that.
well, in the beginning he was,
Okay.
like we went to the ultrasound together, saw that it was triplets together. He was very excited. I was worried because I was like, you didn't really help with the first two. I was like, I was able to manage it on my own. I go, but I will not be able to handle triplets plus a 1.5-year-old and a 3-year-old by myself. I was like,
Right.
you need to be like, if not as much in it as me, if not more, because I'll be making all the milk. I was like, I'll be pumping all the damn time. I was like, this is going to be hard. And I was like, my sister had twins, and
When
she
this is hard enough.
she made it seem like it was the end of the world. So I
No.
was like, and I got three, and she only had one older, and I have two older. And I was just like, I was very concerned for our marriage because I was like, I'm gonna need you stronger than you've ever been. Like he was always like, yeah, not particularly helpful with the children. So I was worried about that when we first found out. But he was like, just keep thinking positive thoughts about the pregnancy. He's like, he's like, don't talk to your one sister as much because she'll be fear mongering, making you think that something could happen with the babies, blah, blah, blah. He's like, you will be healthy, you will be this. So like really great things. And I was healthy. Given everything that happened, like I was a picture of health, didn't have any high blood pressure, nothing like that. I became very immobile by the end because I was humongous. Um, but I was able to give vaginal delivery, which is also very unusual.
Wow.
Delivered all of them. They were all healthy. None of them needed breathing apparatuses, feeding tubes, nothing. And you know, no,
Yeah. Okay. And so was he there for the delivery?
no.
Okay.
At that point, I already had an order for protection against him.
Okay. Yeah.
But I
Okay.
I was angry that he wasn't, even though obviously I knew he couldn't because I
Yeah.
wasn't allowing it. But it was like I was angry that he had done what he'd done. I remember they broke my water, and like all of a sudden, all the emotions just like flew out of me. I was like, why the hell isn't he here?
Yeah. Wow.
Because he delivered Train and Rory.
Hmm.
But I think I had predominantly given up hope that he would ever become normal by that point. Because I remember there was a conversation you and I were having. I was like leaving the gym, driving past, and I remember I was driving past Surfside. For some reason, this conversation I had while I was driving was very specific. And I said, do you think there's hope that he'll ever come out?
I do remember that conversation.
And you said no. You're like, I'm sorry, I think he's too far in. And that stuck with me. And I was like, well, if that's what she thinks, it's probably true. And I need to shift my focus on, instead of trying to get him out of there, focusing on just protecting me and the kids and getting this done. And so I did. And I was like, the quicker I can let go and the quicker I can move on, the easier it will be emotionally for me and my kids. Because there's that like one verse that says like, hope deferred maketh the heart sick.
Yeah. Yeah.
And every time I saw him and talked to him or heard from him, it was like seeing a zombie, somebody in the skin of what you used to know, the voice that you used to know.
Yeah.
But they're an undead monster. That's how it seemed. But yeah.
Yeah. You know, like when you said that, like I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said no. And you know, because with God all things are possible, right?
You said, I hope for you it's a different story than for me. You're like, but my honest opinion is I don't think he'll ever get out.
Yeah. And it, like I know that I had to really wrestle with we pray in faith. You ask anything in Jesus's name and it'll be granted to you. And
They have free will. That's
yes,
where it came
exactly.
in.
Yeah, here I'm praying with the kids. So here I'm praying with the kids, or believing dad will come back. And then every time I heard something new, hey, kids, your dad has a new wife, and the questions and in these young ages going, well, how's he gonna come back? And I'm like, guys, I don't think he is,
Yeah.
And then having to say, guys, he has another kid, and having to tell them, guys, like, yes, we can believe and we can have faith, but yes, ultimately, like God gave us free will, and we can't change that. And so, I kind of want to before, because this is huge, this is touchy, and I don't even know, like, who you've been able to talk to about this, because obviously, like, there's been
I said I do therapy, and then obviously I study psychology,
right?
But yeah,
and like it's like we don't talk often, and like we just know each other just like this, and just these conversations, and like I said, I know you're a strong woman, but yeah, you have feelings, like you have, like, thankfully I haven't cried. And there's different grieving, like you talk about grieving, like there's not at all the emotional, physical longing, anything like that. There's not that grieving. There's definitely been the grief. I had actually go through this thing of forgiveness, and here I thought I was like totally forgiving him and things like that, and we're at this marriage conference. I'm with my new husband in a marriage conference, and they're talking about, okay, ask God who you're supposed to be forgiving. And in my mind, I'm thinking probably Michael for something and probably my dad for something, And as I'm asking God, I just felt that inkling, like, you need to forgive Kabir. And I'm like, ew, like I already did. You're supposed to confess this to like the two other women in your group, the two other wives. And I was like, guys, I said, God is telling me Kabir, but I'm telling you, like, I was like, there's nothing there. And so I don't know where this is going. And so we had to go through this process. They're asking me questions. Like, they're like, specifically, you have to say, I forgive you for this. And, so I'm going through this process, and I'm like, I forgive you for what you said to this kid. I forgive you for not being there and I mean, it was just, the list was longer, and I'm obviously like crying. And then I went to the place, which is, okay, I forgive you for putting me in the position of having to start all over. And I was like, whoa, like I'd never said that before, because when you're in it, you're like tunnel vision. There's no emotion. I know I called it soldier mode. And so in that process of like going, wow, I didn't realize that was there. And then I didn't realize how much pressure I was putting on my spouse now to be all the things that
he wasn't.
That my kids missed out on. And that's not fair. And so it was very like, very like revealing and healing. And so, but I mean, of course, I know that we have to like keep going through this process, but yeah, it's definitely like, to me, and that's why I have a heart for this too. Not only do I have a heart for the women, but I think you and I have this thing of like how, this is, I don't even know if I told you this, but since the last time that that we talked and about the book, I was like, I think it's like 18 kids. Like it's like 4 wives, 18 kids that are affected by this cult. Well, now there's 2 more, not this cult, but a different one, but it's 2 other players. And so we're talking more kids. And so that, it's obviously like I have a heart to I don't know, bring awareness.
It's hard when things affect kids. Like, and I think that for me has been like the hardest part was like, because I chose a husband poorly, now my children have to deal with this. And I have to answer the hard questions of like,
Yes.
why isn't my daddy here?
Right.
Or, you know, like, or a lot of times they'll be like, when are we getting a new daddy? And I'm like, can we buy one from Amazon? I'm like, no. That's not.
Oh, that is so funny that you say that, because like when I had told my he was probably 10 at the time, and when I had brought up, I said, your dad's married. The first thing that came out of his mouth is, well, are you gonna get a new daddy? And so it was like he was thinking husband, but for himself he was thinking daddy.
Yeah, they
And so
never say.
like,
Well, no. Sometimes my dad, like Rory, will be like, "Mom, do you have a boyfriend?" And because my youngest Trinity, there's like a little boy at our church who always gives her hugs. So we say like that's her boyfriend. And so she
okay,
have a boyfriend, and she's like, "Mom, do you have a boyfriend?" And I was like, "No."
have you dated at all? Have you done anything? Like, are you?
I
Yeah, you
I've
tried.
gone
I
on
thought you tried it
dates,
one time.
but they generally like. I think one guy made it to 2 dates, and then
Wow.
I ended it because I was just like, well, I mean, he was physically very attractive, but just not mentally and emotionally at a place that I found him mentally attractive. Like, oh, I was like, I can't believe you don't see how like broken your thinking is, and because like that was part of my problem with TJ as well. Is like he was not. I'm trying to think of a nice way of saying this. He was not like he wasn't a good mind mate. He was a good playmate. We played together all the time, loved watching movies together, loved streaming
Wow, that's a
together,
good way to put it.
play. But a mind mate talking about deep
Like
things, trying to
stimulating conversation.
figure things out. He didn't want to. And he was beginning to grow on that at the end, but then that's when he got hook, lined, and sinker by
Yeah.
the cult. And then like even when I would challenge his thinking with the stuff that they said, when I would catch him into a corner with like the biblical theology of it all and the premises that they were putting forth, his exclamation was like, "Oh, you should stop reading the Bible if it's that difficult." Blah 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 blah. And I'm all like, so you think an infinite God would be so easily understood by your finite mind, or a man
Yes,
who
oh, totally. Yeah.
specifically spoke in parables all the time would intentionally make this very easy to get? I was like, sorry. He wants you to seek him with all your heart, all your mind, all your strength. As if you
Yeah.
think that all of you would be just like dippity doo now, 1 + 1 is 2. Like, no, there's intricacies. The more you read scripture, the more you find. Like,
Oh,
yeah. So that was, and I want somebody who has good critical thinking capacities and can think those things through and be that with me.
yeah.
Especially like because my aspirations and my aside from my children, raising them to love the Lord, is like I want to become a lawyer, and eventually, if God permits, like even go all the way up to Congress, because the laws that I want to change for the food
Wow.
industry stuff has to be done there.
Yes.
But part of the problem is the people who caused the problems are the people who bought and paid for the people in Congress. So we'll see how
Wow.
that goes.
Yeah. Okay, so we're at the 12:30 mark, an hour mark. Are you still okay to go on? Because
Yeah, my kids
it's
generally
so
don't wake up
intense.
till 3 because my parents should be
Okay.
picking up Trey because they're at the gym today. So I don't have
Okay.
to.
I honestly think that like I've got a little more time, but these conversations are so deep. I mean, I don't know, like as I house these things, and I do believe that they'll be on YouTube or podcast or something. Like I was thinking that this one's gonna be down the road a little bit, maybe not, who knows? But if it goes into 2 conversations, which it could easily do.
Yeah, well, I saw all the stuff that you put on there. I was like, I don't know if this is going to fit in one conversation.
Oh, for sure. And I knew it, but I'm like, okay, that sounds like we'll let it flow. Yeah, I mean, so getting back to that whole dating thing, I mean, I think that with what we've gone through, I mean, it makes the whole like list, and that
Well, I
the
know more what I want in a spouse this time. I knew
yes.
what I did like about him. I knew what I didn't like. Not everything was bad about him. There were things I liked, but there are some things that I really didn't like, and like, what do I need? What do I need to, just my knowledge of what I want and what is necessary, and that I would respect. I know better now.
Mhm.
And so, yeah. But also then there's, the specification of I have 5 kids. The one beauty of your and my situations as single moms is at least they're not a part of our lives. So it's as if we're
Yes,
widows. So
for
it's not like they have
sure.
to deal with baby daddy drama. Or like, oh, the kids are leaving and now they're coming back. And like, and having to deal with like deprogramming them after they come back from, like, because you always hear that with people who like have to do
Absolutely. Yeah.
dual parenting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I'm so
very,
thankful for that. Yeah.
and so very fortunately, you don't have to deal with that, which is great because that's what the cult tells them to do. They're like, let them go. They're wicked.
Yeah.
Granted, they did reach out recently.
Oh, he did.
Yeah, he texted me 2 weeks ago or so. I was very polite. He was like, I think he's like, I don't want to start problems. He's like, but if you're willing to let the kids Zoom or Skype me, I think it's important for them to know their father. I think it's very interesting that he didn't say I want to know them,
Yes.
just that they know him.
Right.
Um, but given that he also didn't say sorry for, and obviously this hasn't been because but obviously people listening don't, but like tried to kidnap the kids, stole the van, had people from the cult commented, I pray curses on them, on her and them for you. And I'm like, you're part of a place that is praying curses. At the time of when they typed it, they're babies. You're praying
Yeah.
curses
Right. I
on
know.
babies.
Yeah. Like, it's really that. Is that like the God that we serve?
Like
Like,
that's the father heart of God right
right.
there
Yeah.
versus on
Wow.
babies. Um yeah, and so anyway, so I just said politely back. I prayed about it over the weekend. I was just like, hey, thanks for your polite inquiry. However, given the present circumstances, which I wasn't gonna go into it, but it's like you're in a cult and kind of crazy.
Mhm.
I don't think it's in the best interest of the children, which it wouldn't be because it's like, how do I know that he's going to want to continue to be in their lives? And if, I mean, at his present state, he's cuckoo pants. So I don't want you in their lives.
Mhm.
If you were normal and like left the cult and like proved that you were normal, then we could like start reintroducing that.
Yeah,
But
exactly. Totally.
as he is,
No.
no.
Yeah.
Like, it'd be like what he did with his dog. He had Taz. Taz was horrible because he was raised by him. Dropped him off his parents because he was so horrible and he was trying to bite our kids. And then now that he's out of the cult, I wondered, I was like, is he going to go get his stupid dog back? He never did. He left him there. And the
Yeah.
dog, he said, he goes, it hurts my heart because I just know that Taz sits by the window looking for me, waiting for me all his life. And I was
Mhm.
like, you're going to do that to the kids if
Yeah.
I let you talk to them the way you are now.
Right.
They'll hear from you. They'll become so attached because it's dad, not necessarily who he is,
Yeah.
just what he
That's
is.
Yeah.
And then they'll
Exactly.
wait and they'll be like, Mom, when is dad calling? Or can we see dad? Can we meet dad? Can we go to work? And like, it just opened a can of worms. And I was like, no, I'm going to protect you guys from that chaos.
And so your two oldest remember him, and do they
No,
ask about it? They don't even remember him anymore.
no, they're too young. Like, you have child amnesia from generally, you can start having stable memories from the time you're 6 onward. But Trey
Mhm.
was literally turned 3 the day before TJ left. They have no memories. I mean, like, they know what he looks like now and they know his name because TJ knew, or TJ knew, Trey knew that his dad was an NFL player and then he played for the Vikings. So he, while he was at the kids academy at Lifetime, was trying to figure out with other kids who his dad was. And so one day he was like, Mom, is my dad Dalvin Cook? He's like this black running back on the Vikings. And our last name's Cook. And he knows that. And he knows his
Oh,
dad's black.
gotcha.
And he knows his dad has dreads.
Oh,
And I was like, oh, you poor soul. You're trying to figure out what the hell your dad is.
right.
I was like, no, honey. I was like, your dad used to play football. He doesn't anymore. I was like, your dad's name was TJ Clemmings.
Wow.
And, so it was just like, I felt bad for the poor little dude trying to figure it out. You
Yeah.
know,
It's interesting because I think so. I had a 3-year-old. Was she 3? Yeah, she was 3. Our only daughter was 3. The
so she does,
5-year-old.
unless your older ones are talking about him. I don't think
Exactly. I
she's.
think it's more of that. And I think it's more the idea of him. So yeah, for sure they keep because my kids will talk about different stories or they have a childhood. It's like as much as I don't want to talk about those things, like he's part of that. And the different way we used to do things. And so yeah, I'll have to ask because like I don't know
I
what they
studied it. One of my classes, I was able to study any topic, and I chose
that's
childhood amnesia
crazy.
because I wanted to know. And plus, Tracy told me. Mathis's wife.
Yes.
We had
Okay.
talked. She was a child psychologist.
Okay. Is
And
it
she
Brandy?
said,
Is it Brandy?
Brandy,
Okay.
crazy, dear heavens, Brandy. And she said to me, she goes, so long as you don't talk about him, she goes, they'll forget. She goes,
Yeah.
because a lot of the memories from that time is more like the repeated or the pictures they see
Yes.
that create the memories that are not actually from remembering it, but just because
Right.
they've seen these things.
That's
And
good to
so
know.
I was very intentional for the first 2 years to never talk about him unless they
Oh,
asked. But I
yeah.
never brought him up because I was
I
like,
have that dynamics. That's the difference.
yeah,
Yeah.
because she said too for hers, she's like, because I had the older ones, the younger ones feel like they knew him, even
Right.
though they wouldn't. And she's
Yeah.
like, because yours are all so young, and she told me this like right when it happened, because I spoke to her forever ago. She's like, so long as you can keep a cap on it, she goes, they will entirely forget him.
Wow, that's
So I
great.
did. I mean, granted, now like I give them information about him because I don't, if I, my therapist is like, if you make it too mystical, it'll create a larger problem. She's
Yes.
like, so just if they ask a question, give a broad answer.
Mhm.
And so that they know, so they don't feel that like thirst
Yeah.
for needing to know.
Yeah. So,
But
so my youngest, who's 6, he never met his dad. Just like so, same scenario.
he
I
was
mean, I don't
pregnant. Yeah.
remember, yeah, I don't remember how long it was, but found out it was 4 months in September. Had him in March. So yeah, so no interaction there. Um, but it's funny that you were like talking about like the kids saying, "Can we buy him?" You know, because there was a point in the car, and it's interesting how God like innately like he just puts longings, you know, in our hearts. And so he's like 2 in his little car seat, and he's like, "Mom, I was looking for a daddy, and I found Michael Daddy." And I was like crying, like, God, thank you so much. Because that was like, you know, that's like obviously the big prayer for me and big prayer for my daughter is that, Lord, I want my daughter to not ever feel like she's the reason why this happened, and that she's valuable, she's created in the image of God, and that she's loved and all that. So I was really praying for that dynamics. And God's been faithful with that. But like there was also a point where um my youngest guy, he says, Mom, thanks for buying Michael. You know, because all of a sudden, and I'm seeing this shift of like, gosh, like, okay, you know, he found a Michael Daddy, and
if
then
you were in the cult, you know, and it were the reverse, you would have bought him.
yeah,
You could have
yes.
been bought.
Oh my gosh, I don't even want to start with that. Yes,
The
about
irony.
the whole buying thing. And then there was that point of like him realizing, Mom, like Michael's not been here, you know, like we've all been around. He's not been around. So my kids are like, when are you gonna tell him? I'm like, guys, I'm not like trying to hide it. I just don't want to confuse him. There's a point where it's
Oh,
like,
like if he
oh,
asks, I think that's one
yeah.
thing, but like when they're too young, that those concepts don't make sense.
Yeah, and so so now that he's 6, we've had, I think it was like last year we had that, you know, just different conversations um of okay, well, this is your dad and he's not around anymore. And it was funny because it was like he got his questions answered and I was like, okay, like that was, you know, I think later that day we were all talking at dinner and I said, guys, I said, you know, Justice was asking some questions. Justice, do you want to like, you know, talk about what we had talked about? And it was totally, you know, like, I mean, we were talking for a while, but he was bringing up school or, you know, bringing up like nothing that had to do with that. And so even though he calls Michael, like when he's at school, if he talks about, what do you say? Oh, he said, my dad has a big drone or something like that. So and so now, you know, he refers to him as dad. But yeah, just interesting how, you know, you're just talking about how their minds are and things like that. Cause you know, it is a little bit of a like, oh my gosh, like, is he gonna want to search him out? Is he gonna, you know, see him as more as dad? Like, what about like my others? Like my daughter, I would definitely
As
have
long
to
as you
say,
have a really good relationship with Michael, and he fulfills that need, I don't think so. I mean, like, because I think of like Shaq. Shaq was raised by somebody who wasn't his dad biologically,
Mhm.
and he never sought out his biological dad until his dad that raised him died. Once his dad that
Mm,
raised him died, then he searched out his biological dad to know him. But you
yeah,
know, as long as like all those needs are filled and they're a good dad, I don't see that being like a
yeah,
huge problem.
yeah. So pretty crazy about
That's
that.
like what I hope. I hope that God eventually brings me somebody that would be a phenomenal husband and father, and that they feel no need to search them out when they get older. And like I'll tell them more the details of like what really happened once they're old enough to comprehend it. But like right now, it would just be detrimental and put fear in them. Like we were almost kidnapped. Oh, you stole our phone. Oh. Like like they don't need that. So
yeah, I mean, and the cool thing is like as they do get older, I know for sure. So my oldest was 15 at the time. He's now 21. And to see how God is like faithful to talk them through. Like there's no one that's mad at God or me or their father. I mean, I take that back. Maybe I know they're gonna have to deal with emotions toward their father. But like God has helped them to understand they know I had to do what I did. And so they respect their father, they respect the fact that, what he did and football wise, but they know he wasn't right, and so I'm just praying that like as they
when
move
my
on.
kids they ask why did daddy leave, I say because he played football and his brain got sick. And they
Well,
say, Daddy, come home. And I say, unless somebody helps heal his brain, I go, Daddy probably can't come home.
mhm.
And then they say, well, can God fix it? I go, God could. I go, so you can pray for that. It's a great prayer. Pray that daddy's brain gets fixed.
Mhm.
But I honestly do think that's a huge part of it. I think there's like a combination of a lot of different factors that went into it, but CTE is the larger one that I do think he does have.
Which leads to my next thing. So when I look at it, I don't know how many concussions. I know that it's not just concussions. I personally think that for sure there was a spiritual door that was open just with that first thing that he said, because he's fine the whole time as a whole. And then as soon as he started going along, like believing, oh, hey, women aren't created in the image of God. Well, then if you believe that, then all those things that
That was the first tenant that like got him to where he went.
oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, that's for sure. Where I was like, if I can pinpoint it, and there was other things too.
Okay.
But for sure, I remember when he said that, I was like, okay, like 101, Christiana 101. And so here we're having this conversation. He kept saying, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. I'm like, no, it's a big deal. Like,
It's not a big deal for you,
yeah, I'm
perhaps.
like, I know. I'm like, who am I? Am I floating around between man and dog, and so even though I knew that truth, it was obviously starting to get to me. And initially he was saying it's not a big deal. But then over time it was like my voice was like, oh no, you're not a complimenting or a complementary part of me or a partnership. No, you should be a clone of me because you're not creating the image of God. And he was trying to that's where the whole thing of I don't think that the cult was in the picture yet. And so he started doing research and he was trying to find obviously things that were agreeing with his conclusion of women are created
Bias.
by God.
Confirming his bias.
Yeah,
Make his
exactly.
lifestyle.
He couldn't find much controversy there, maybe a couple, because I started looking at it too, and I'm like, no, everything is saying it's obvious, it's in there more than one occasion in the Bible. But then that's when he got stuck on the head cover thing. So that little conversation and argument was on hold, and then all of a sudden it was like, okay, our 2-year-old daughter at the time, she was 1 or 2. He's like, yeah, she's gonna wear a head cover. At first, no, first he said she's coming. Yeah, we're gonna cover her head during prayer. So as much as I disagreed with it, I was like, okay, she's 2, whatever age she was. It wasn't that I'm very like, whatever. That's kind of my attitude, unless I'm really passionate. In this stage, I was very passionate, but at the same time, like she's just breastfeeding. When we're at church, I'm just gonna cover her head with a blanket like anything else. And so when she prayed, I'd cover her head. And then when she wasn't, when we were done praying, whether she's breastfeeding or not, like just like take off the cover. Well, then at some point, like, and I'm doing my research about head covers and are they forced? What, who does it, who doesn't? And I remember like he told us to buy one and it had to be like the Muslim one. Like all the others were just bonnets or head, just like even like bands. But she had to have this. And so yeah, so that's a whole other conversation that we can get into another time. But that's where it was going with all that, which took it. So yeah, so again, that whole thing about the lies. That's where it started with it.
PJ's initial thing that I always saw in him was the multiple wives thing. Like
Mhm.
I remember, like we were living at our Eden Prairie house, like way before the cult thing ever entered the picture, and he was like, "Oh, let's watch this show," and it was the like Sister Wives show, and
Mhm.
like me and Melissa are all sitting there, and I'm feeling wildly uncomfortable because like he brought that up before numerous times. He was like, "I don't think it's not biblical to have multiple wives," and I'm like, "Babe,
That's what
totally is."
that's
I was
what
just
that
like, and
and
like
too. Uh-huh.
I explained it all to him, and it never clicked in his brain.
Yes.
And so
It's
like we were sitting
understand
there
it's
watching it, and I just felt
understandable.
this like dread, like as if my if life were a movie show, that was like the foreshadowing of the horrors
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
come.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, granted, he always said, "I'm not going to the cult so that I can get extra wives or concubines or blah 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 blah." But it also was, oh, those events where I cheated on you weren't cheating; they would just
Yeah.
be extra wives or concubines. And I was
Yeah.
like, what about the prostitutes? Because there were still prostitutes in the Old Testament, and that was still just prostitution and adultery.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he couldn't win because he'd done too many things. But
Yeah.
in his mind, he still won. But you know,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like when you think about why, and you can answer this too, like why would they be drawn to that? Like people when people ask me that, I'm like, you know what? It's like a warped familiarity and a nice transition because it's about the respect of the man. Like I know that the whole thing of like everything got too feminine for them because I mean if you think like I don't know how long these guys were playing football and thank God that's we'll get on that CTE conversation a little bit but like I think okay I'm almost like glad that my kids have a late start and that I do set the tone football's not everything right but these guys are in it for so long and they're in that environment of barking orders and men are like it's like that to where they go into normal life and it's like everything seems feminine right and so I look at that part and I look at like okay why was the cult appealing well it's all about the marking orders it's all about the rank it's all about like it's the same thing it's like you have to perform and also I mean with them being in football they're like they kind of bumped the levels pretty quick yeah I know my ex did it was like right in the mix of like the inner circle or so it seemed and then of course like for us Kabir's father was Muslim and
yeah.
his mom was Christian and so that whole concept of polygamy and the head covers that's only a couple of generations above him so it's just an easy thing
Yeah, I
for
mean, like, so I think I told you via text, but like, in one of my classes, I actually encountered a woman, another student, who worked for a company that actually helped deprogram people out of the cult. And so I asked her, I was like, why do these people choose this? What predisposes them to joining a cult? All this kind of stuff. And like, she wrote me this super long she cited all the studies. Like, she did phenomenal. Like, I actually have it saved in my computer because whenever I write my book, I intend to reference it.
yes
Um, because it was just so enlightening. I was like, TJ was just like food fodder to become one. Like he grew up in a very strict religious household growing up, which is one of the predispositions. Like, granted, his family was Christian, but he thought only the denomination of the Church of God of Prophecy
legalistic yes
was the one where you're saved. Every other brand of Christianity you weren't, which is very similar to the cult. Like only people in the cult are going to heaven, the rest of you are damned. Um, and then, but like within the NFL too, like when when they leave, they have such a loss of identity because for a lot of people, any person who retires is called activity theory. If you can fulfill an activity with something of like kind, it makes that transition far easier because you still feel like you have those skill sets, you still feel like you have that use.
Mhm.
But you can't really do that with the NFL or because like where are you gonna every weekend be
To go
cheered
to
on by
coaching
hundreds of thousands of people?
right yeah that's why you see that the normal transitions you go into coaching you go into sportscasting and people think that that's the natural thing and
Because
people
there's
don't
not
even
enough
see
physicians.
it yeah exactly and people don't see that like it's a grieving process like all for them it's like oh, okay well they're done okay who's next and so they don't see the reality
Hmm.
and I don't think the guys have room to, because that tough exterior, I don't think that they have room to just go, holy crap, like, what am I gonna do now? And so
Well, yeah.
it's just kind of easy to just find, like, it's like they need to find something quick so they don't. I think that that's the lack of the healing process, that it's easy to just fall right into these things.
I don't even know if it's a healing process, but I don't think they understand, or they lack the time management skills to be able to figure out how to fill in those blanks, because a lot of time their life is dictated to them,
Yes, for
you
yep.
know, or they have if the things that they're not told to do by the team, you know, their agencies will help them do it. Like, oh, you want to plan a trip? Okay, call, for us it was Tabitha. Call Tabitha. Tabitha will handle
For
it all.
sure. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and you know, which is amazing. Tabitha's a great job, but you know, it's like it makes it so you're not as skilled at doing these things.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I also see it's like the military and it's like prison. It's like in those situations you're getting out of it, then you're like, oh my gosh, I have to make my own decisions. You know, and I don't want people to know that I'm freaking out. Okay, well, where can I go right now to put me
make
in that
this safe.
comfort
Yeah, so
zone?
that looking for safety, looking for identity is one of the reasons people choose a cult. You know, on top of that, at the time TJ joined, it was COVID, which is he saw it as a safety measure. And like
Mm,
now, the
okay.
first time ever I actually watched one of his videos, like last week after he reached out for interesting reasons. I want to see if he threatened me, because I was learning about assault, and assault in my criminal law class, you don't actually have to touch the person. It's verbal. If I verbally
Yes.
threaten you and there's reason to believe that you could carry those things out, it is assault. And I was like, bro, that man was threatening me all the time. So just as more of like, I don't know if I'd actually pull up a lawsuit, but it was more so I'm like, this is interesting. I want to see if anything he said falls in line of what would constitute as assault. So I started listening to one of them, and it was like from 2 years ago. And the man was so like, he's like, you look at the times that we're living in. He's like, it's dangerous. Who's gonna protect you? Who's gonna protect the kids? What if 5 men with guns come in the house? What are you gonna do? And like all this kind of stuff. And somebody was like, was he saying he was gonna come in with 5 men and guns? And I was like, no, it didn't seem like what he was inferring. But if it could be inferred, then that would be assault. But it was just like he was very scared. He was really scared. I mean, like every time he went to Costco, he came home with like so much food to shove in our basement, because he was just like, when he left to join the cult, he took like, he had bought like a crap ton of like freeze dried food, like tons of it. He took all of that. He took the Berkey water filter, like everything that was like really essential to survival. He took, and I'm like, because you care about your family, you're going to a place that has these things, and you take it, knowing we're not following you. But also in the initial, he was trying to use a lot of fear tactics to make me go with him. So I think
Right.
he made me feel like you don't have anything if you want protection, if you want to be safe.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So they're the fear tactics toward you, but I look at that as the devil's fear tactics that just that made them do what they did. I think fear is
Well, it
one of the,
motivated them. It just wouldn't motivate me.
yes, exactly.
So I was like, and God protected me. Like his hand of faithfulness and protection and provision
Mhm.
throughout everything was, I mean, like it's so, there's no way you can look at my story and not know he did it.
Right.
Protected me. There were moments where it definitely felt like horrible. Like when they stole my van, that was like the one time I like really lost it. I was like in my front yard rolling around in my robe. Instead of sackcloth and
Your big
ashes.
old belly, you're like,
Oh no, I'd already had the kids.
oh, okay, okay, okay.
I was
Oh,
like so sleep
after,
deprived,
oh my gosh.
and it was a Sunday. And so I was like, instead of, yeah, I was always joking, saying instead of sackcloth and ashes, it was bathrobe and grasses, because I was literally like rolling around in my front yard because the police were being such jerks to me. They redeemed themselves. The investigator was phenomenal. Um, but I was just like, I have no car seats, and like, and Elias did get sick. He had to go to the ICU for a week, and like, I
Yeah.
had no car seats. Like, luckily, I had one of the old ones that wasn't for the triplets. It was like for a single baby. Like, luckily, I had one of those not in the car. You know, but just like a bunch of stuff. Like, I was just, when I initially I was so upset, but like it turned out to be a huge blessing, because then he had the
Yes.
criminal lawsuit.
Yeah.
He got caught. He spent 11 days in prison. But I
Oh,
even see God's hand's protection over TJ with all that too. An interesting thing, as I learned about the diversion program that he got for his criminal case. Diversion, you are disqualified from getting diversion if you have had a domestic abuse dispute. So in order for protection would constitute, he was never officially served it. So
mhm.
it was not in the system as like done. He was in prison for 11 days, or not prison, but jail for 11 days. It should have been served. because like who couldn't get that stuff served? It never
Yeah.
did.
Wow.
Because it didn't, he was able to qualify for diversion, was able to complete diversion, and now his record is expunged, swiped clean, as if nothing ever happened. So
Wow.
if he ever comes out of the cult, I initially, like, when all this was going down, like I didn't want to go there for protection. I'm like, he won't be able to ever use his degree because his degree was criminal justice. Like,
Mhm.
you can't go into that doing what you're doing. If you have this, like, you'd be screwed for life. And I didn't want to do it. I remember I even called his dad. I was like, can you talk to him? I was like, I don't want to do this. I go, but I don't see any other way of keeping the kids safe.
Yeah.
And I did it, and it kept me safe, but he never got served it.
Yeah.
So if he were to leave the cult, like, that's the blessing I see of God's hand still over TJ. Is if he ever left, yes, he screwed up life with me and the kids,
Mhm.
but his like record is clean. Sure, he
Mhm.
had all the videos. You can get those removed. He wasn't a huge player like your husband, so he's not so memorable. He could go on to live a normal life.
Yeah. And hopefully, I mean,
I hope one day for that for him.
everything.
Not
Yeah.
that I'll ever be with him. Like,
Right.
my marriage was traumatizing before he joined the cult.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Wow. Okay. I would love to get into the next one. We're gonna have to hold off on the CTE one, which I know you're probably really passionate about. I
Well, I
gotta
actually like wrote down some, like, I read my paper before you called, and I wrote down the notes of like importance. I was like, oh, these tidbits and who wrote it is important. But
yeah. Well, because I want to leave it at this, and who knows how we're gonna edit it, but I mean, like I wanted to highlight like your strength in all this because like I said, like no one understands, and it's not a victim thing, it's not a like a poor me thing that I'm an NFL wife, but like people just don't see um to an extent the things that that happen, and the different struggles that go on. And so I've always admired you. I've always been like, wow, like she's got triplets, and she's, like the fact that here I was pregnant with one, and I know, no doubt, like God got me through it. I know the joy that I had. Like people were looking at me crazy, like I can't believe you're going through all this stuff, and you have a smile on your face, and it is only God. And so I think about you, and I just think, like, one, thank you for doing this. Again, this is not like, over. I'd love to continue the conversation. I thank you for being so real, so transparent. Um, like strong. I know that your strength does not come from like your own, but just to be bold enough to protect your family, to stand up for truth, that's huge. So and I love that you just you're comical. I love
my comedic relief is, I think, for my own mind as well. I'm all like, ha ha ha, he's so
yes.
funny. Like, it's horrible. Oh, but I use rolling around, there's just, I either laugh or cry, and I prefer to laugh. Obviously I'll still take the time when it needs to be grieved and need to cry, because
Mhm.
I want to heal properly so I can move forward.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna, ignore it. But
Yeah,
I don't know. I just want to learn from it so I don't repeat the mistakes.
for sure. Like, and so like the last interviews or the last conversations I've had, I wanted to highlight like both of them within like the shorter conversations we had. Like my brand, my passion is Lady Bellator. So she's a daughter of God, so she's like royalty. She's the bride of Christ, whether single or married. So you fall into that right now. You're the bride of Christ, but you're not a wife. You're the contending matriarch for your family. You're the one who's like stands in the gap for them, and you're an impact maker. I mean, so many ways, like wow, like you're doing it. Like you're taking care of the kids. You're doing all your research. You're going to law school. Like you have a strong passion, and like that's the thing. Like I think consistently, the women that I've seen, the women that God is connecting me with, they're strong, beautiful women who are doing it like that. It's like that you're not going to keep them down. And so I just think that that's something that needs to be heard. It gives others that are going through this or that may like see that this is something that maybe like that they're like thinking. I mean, let me just say this, that that last person, she was on a Facebook group, and she's like, at the risk of sounding crazy, I think my husband is in a cult. And so for me to be able to go, you're not crazy. And to be able to talk her through, there's someone that needs to hear you, there's someone that needs to hear me, because it's just something that if we don't say anything, and especially in the dynamics that they're in, like for you and I, like you were like, okay, you sought me out because you're like, okay, she understands. And so
I needed advice on how to avoid pitfalls that you would know that need to be avoided.
yes.
I didn't know what they were capable of. I didn't know any of that. Because I was like, I don't know. I need advice. A man of many counselors doesn't come to harm. So that's counselors.
Yeah. So there's that. There's for me, it was like, I don't want this out in the open. Who's going to understand? I don't want him to get in trouble. I don't want it to be bigger, especially in Green Bay, because and it was super humbling. Like, okay, how many marriages did we help? And then here we are, like,
we were literally doing a newlyweds there, like we did our first small group, and it was newlyweds, and we had like 2 couples over to our house, and we never got to do the last one because he left, and they needed time off too. But like by the time he came back, he was crazy pants, and then we're getting divorced, and it was just like,
ouch.
I was like, oh.
We didn't see that coming. Sorry.
No, like I remember I asked our pastor, I was like, should we even do this? Because he knew of like the issues that we had with our marriage, like of his infidelity and all that crap. So I personally didn't feel like we were like a horrifically strong couple, because I was like, if we were, I would have trust, I would feel safe with him, like all these things. And I didn't have those things.
Yeah.
They weren't earned. There was no indication that that was something I should do. It'd be unwise for me to think so. But he was like, yeah, no, I think you guys could do it. Like I think there was knowledge that was accumulated through the different stuff that like we had studied together, and certain things that did help. But it's like, no marriage is perfect too, but I don't know. I don't know. Part of the two thing is like, I realized that the ability to repress unpleasant things, I didn't know I did it until I was rereading my prayer journals of those times. Because I thought, he was good for a year. He didn't cheat. I felt safe with that. That's why we were able to get pregnant with triplets. And that's what was in my brain. And I'm reading my prayer journals. And I was scared as hell. I do not feel safe to get pregnant, but I don't want to tell him I don't want to get pregnant because he's going to yell at me and he's going to start a whole fight. And I was like, so God, please just don't let me get pregnant. If, because I'm allergic to every form of birth control. So the only way for us was pull out game or nothing, and that's up to him. I'm not in charge of that. And, but I was like really scared, and he hadn't been good for a year. He had done a couple things, and I read that too. And I was like, how did I get to the point where I told myself he'd been good for a year and then I was okay with us getting pregnant? And it's like, I had, not me, but my subconscious or something had to create that so that it was palatable to live in my dire circumstances.
Yeah.
I'm sure that happened a lot. Like I remember looking at other like bigger players, and like everybody knew that they were like a horrendous cheater. And I remember thinking like, how in the world does she stay with him? How is she happy? And I'm like, now I know. She's probably deluded the hell out of herself, and she's not even aware of it, just to like make do, keep the nuclear family. Because she grew, like, the woman I'm thinking of grew up in a Christian family as well. And while I'm thinking these things of her, like back when I was in the Vikings, I was in the same situation, not even recognizing the irony, the speck of sawdust, or the log, and the it's just but just like totally unaware of it, because that's what trauma can do. And my next class after this one is understanding trauma. I'm looking forward to that class. Hopefully it's enlightening.
I don't know, like, so here I have this passion for women. I have different groups. I don't know. I call it mentorship. I'm praying on where God leads me for that. But I would love to, when you get more, the more connected and the more like knowledgeable you get, I would love to like, open up to some sort of class, because you definitely have like I said, we haven't even talked about the CTE thing, but you have insight. And
I like to study.
So
we really have like, I haven't really discussed any of the statistics of the studies that were done, how they were done, how they figured things out. But I do that for everything in relation to this so that I can understand it. My goal, like I know you've written a book, but yours is more just about NFL in general. I intend to after my understanding trauma class and after I graduate, because there'll be a period of months before I start law school. They'll be done in December, and then law school should happen the following fall. My hope is to write a book about what happened, what it discovered. There's a whole for that, like most of like 30% of them are mildly depressed, 20% are severely depressed after leaving, so like
But
those are
because you
huge
cut out for a
numbers.
little bit, so you cut out for a little. So you were talking about like the guys. So you've been studying about CT, or sorry, what did you
just leaving, just retiring the NFL in general. 30% are mildly depressed, 20% are severely depressed after graduating, after retiring. And so it's just like a huge thing that like I don't think they don't forewarn them about, or if they did, it was never, he never told me about it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's, and all this, like there's studies just specifically about NFL players in retirement. And I mixed that in with the paper that I wrote about CTE. Because I was trying to see like, why was TJ in such a vulnerable state to do what he did? And but so I'm hoping to mix all of that in to the book that I write, and along with my story.
Yeah.
It'll be like informational plus storyline. I'm trying to figure out like how exactly, because obviously my story is pretty dramatic, just like yours. But with the stuff that I found out about it, I find it so intriguing that it could be like a forewarning for other people who's.
I mean, it's you have because I know for me, like I've always kind of leaned more on the spiritual side, and it's just, so for me it's just been an obvious like more of a leaning in that way, so less physiological, although I definitely see different things, or experience different things with that part, but like your research, I
think there's a spiritual side to mine as well, but I see, like so Proverbs is always one of my favorite books, and like they say, like a wise man sees danger and takes refuge, but a fool keeps going and suffers for it. So like I feel like for other people in the position of like they're in the NFL, if they can see the dangers that are coming,
for sure,
versus just continuing to go and suffer for it.
Totally. Oh my gosh, I love that you said that. Yes. Yeah.
So like for me, that would be more of the thing for me. It's like here are the nuggets that you should know, because I don't know. I mean, I know why they did it. There is they can inject a chemical. What the name of it is, I don't know. They can inject a chemical into your bloodstream. It will connect to the protein tau, and then they will do a PET scan and see where it congregates. So there's like cerebral sulci. I imagine it as like the state lines of the brain as a whole, and then there's like sections, so the state lines. If it congregates in there in particular fashions, it's indicative that you have CTE. So they can tell this all your life. They always said, oh, you can only tell if you're dead. And that's not the truth. There are ways to tell when they're alive. And then they have done treatments to see, can we remedy some of these things? They can do hyperbaric chamber treatments for like 90 minutes at a time. And they've done it to an ex-NFL player, and his cognitive ability to his own assessment was better. And from scans as well, showed that it was that the damage had repaired and things like that. So I think that's one of the other things, like maybe I'll sue the NFL or make it that this is a practice that they have to do, because it's so prevalent.
I was gonna say, that doesn't even seem like
all that hard. They do so
expensive, but I mean, come on, like
it's their brain. Yeah, it's like you only get one.
Right.
You repair your knee and get a fake knee put in. You can't.
Yeah, you think that insurance is part of this?
I think it should just be like a preparatory thing. Like you just have it done before you enter the NFL, or even before you start football, college. And then see how you're doing on a yearly basis. Is your brain deteriorating quickly? Is it not? Okay, the risks for you, if you're higher, at least you know your risks of this is what could happen to you if you continue. So that for me was, and like if they know like they have I think when TJ was with the Redskins, they had hyperbaric chambers. So it's like just make all of them mandatory.
Yeah, I've heard of those things. Yeah.
As like, because they have all those tools, so it's like, protect those dudes.
Yes. Yeah.
They have families. This is
it's not just a game. So much more than that. Okay. So thank you for your time. We will continue this conversation.
So sorry.
Yeah. What did you just say? Say that
again. I'm a Minnesota goodbyer. I like just keep talking about different things.
Yeah. That Wisconsin was a little bit in me too. Yep. Wait, are you from? You're from
I grew up and raised, yeah. This
Ah,
is, I actually never stayed in this room growing up. This is the first time I stayed in this room, but this is my family house that I grew up in.
wow.
I stayed in every house in this bedroom in this house now because when I moved back in, I was in my parents' room because of all my kids, and this was
Yeah,
my dad's office at the time.
yeah. Wow. All right. Well, I will let you go. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm gonna see like we'll see how we're gonna splice this up.
When are you gonna post it? Because I know whenever you post it, I can expect like some hellfire.
mm, from
Just so I'm prepared.
yeah, and it won't be I mean, like I said, like I don't I don't know. I'll pray about it, but I can't imagine having maybe like yours be right away. So I'm gonna take I'm gonna give these to someone that I've been doing work with, and because I'd like it to be like an hour, but yours could be almost like 2:45s, 2 45-minute ones, or a little bit less than that. But yeah, I'll definitely let you know. And I mean,
That's
you're
why I
very
keep asking Sports Illustrated too. I'm like, when's it coming out? Because I just know I was like, crap's gonna hit the fan. And I every other time TJ's done something, I'm normally not the one who sees it. I get like approached by somebody I know who's like, "Did you see?" And then I'm like, "See what?" And then they show me, and I'm like, "Oh!" And I'm always like caught unawares.
right. I haven't seen anything. I mean, every so often I'll personally check, but it's like, I don't know, I just feel yucky about it.
No,
But
like I intentionally try not to check myself because it's like I'm moving beyond this.
right.
But for the sake of too, like, because I don't know how sane they are and like the damages they could do, I like to know that he's generally there so that I'm
Yeah.
not afraid of like he's stalking me
Ah,
or
that's
he's
true.
here, or he's gonna try to steal something again. Like I just, that's just
Yeah.
part of my life.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like, I mean, yeah, I don't have that geographical concern, but yeah, for sure. Like, just like you said, I mean, it's creepy to go, okay, he's read my book. Why? Or, like, and I think that's probably why I checked is I think it was after I went up there and I'm like, okay, I know he's probably going to do a video of, he probably recorded whatever speaking engagement I did and interject, that whole thing. Who knows? But what was I gonna say?
Have some cult members in the crowd videotaping you. You never
Yeah,
know. That's the
yeah,
creepy part is you don't know because they're like nutter butters.
yeah. So I'll definitely keep you posted. Oh, this is what I was gonna say. The one time I checked, you think like, okay, you're like, at least for me, like, maybe there's hope. Maybe he's not going to say something, crazy. And I mean, it was not even that long, probably a minute or two. But he was talking about that men are starting to realize their value, which I agree.
You have
Men
value,
have
yes.
their value, yes. And he says, and with straight face, he's like, I mean, and really just outside of what's between her legs, what does she have to offer? And I was like, how do your what are your wives wife? I don't know. I just know he has a wife and a concubine. I don't know if he's got a third wife. I'm like, how can you just hear that and just be okay? Like, I don't, it's like, who I'm curious, and maybe because I think I have connection with a couple of them that are in it or that used to be in it. I
Hmm.
don't understand. Like, that's the one thing. Like, what are you being told that you're okay?
I think, ironically, like when they say it so bluntly in the cult, it's like, oh, but like I think a lot of men view women that way, because they watch so much porn that they literally see them as
Right.
like a sexual
Oh
object. And
yeah,
it's
for
like,
sure.
okay, so you're just a vagina with legs walking around.
Yes.
Like if you don't have that, but you're like my sister was telling me about some guy at work because he like struggles with relationships, but he keeps dating these like Christians or Muslims who like won't have sex till they're married. He was like, she sat on my lap and then she wouldn't even give me a handy. And I'm like, what a like, so using your lap as a seat somehow equates handy. Like I was like, but like there's men out there that are just
I mean, but to put it like on, I mean, at least if you're gonna do it, at least like
no, because that's just what they
who,
think.
who would put it on video? We put it on video so that everybody can go, oh my gosh, you said that.
Because they don't think
I'm like, no, I know a lot of them think it, but but I don't know.
oh yeah, no. It's depravity. It's like Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Oh yeah. Yeah, given over. I know. That's what I think too. That's what I felt with, we'll be done with like that whole image of God thing. I just felt like, oh my gosh, that opened a door to the most illogical thought process, So
I hear one of my babies going out crying.
and I hear my biggest baby. So okay. All right. So good talking to you. Thank you for your time. And I will keep you posted. I will definitely let you know. But yeah, I mean, I will definitely make sure
Post it and also
yeah.
I haven't, aside from the other podcasts, I haven't said anything publicly. So if he watches it, it'll be the first time he's heard my thoughts.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering that too. All right, girl. So nice chatting with you.
Until next time, love well, celebrate your strength, and discover the new things you are capable of. You are a light in the lives of those around you, and no night is too dark for you to find your way.